The Brexit effect on business, its challenges and realities. In 2016, the United Kingdom's decision to leave the European Union was hailed as a reclaiming of sovereignty, control over borders, and an opportunity for economic growth. But as we enter 2025, the business world is still reeling from its aftershocks. Brexit has introduced trade barriers, disrupted supply chains, created labor shortages, and reshaped migration patterns in ways few anticipated. In this video, we'll explore how Brexit has impacted British businesses, the EU economy, and the flow of migrant workers. We'll focus on hard-hitting facts, data, and the ripple effects across industries. 1. The trade fallout. Brexit fundamentally reshaped the UK's relationship with its largest trading partner, the EU. Trade decline. Trade between the UK and the EU is no longer frictionless. By 2023, the UK Office for National Statistics reported a 15% drop in exports to the EU and an 8.3% decline in imports compared to pre-Brexit levels. This trade reduction represents billions of pounds in lost revenue for businesses. Increased costs for businesses. The introduction of customs checks, tariffs, and new regulatory requirements has added significant costs. Businesses now face average delays of 48 to 72 hours at ports, with many having to hire additional staff just to handle customs documentation. A study by the British Chambers of Commerce in 2023 estimated that businesses have collectively spent £15 billion annually managing Brexit-related trade complexities. Case studies. The food and drink sector, one of the UK's largest export industries, saw exports to the EU fall by 10% in 2023. This was largely due to tariffs on processed goods and delays in perishable shipments. Small businesses have been hit hardest. According to a Federation of Small Businesses survey, 30% of SMEs that previously traded with the EU have now ceased exporting altogether, as the costs of compliance outweigh the profits. 2. Supply chain disruptions. The introduction of trade barriers has created a ripple effect across supply chains. Port congestion and delays. Ports like Dover and Felixstowe now face routine backlogs, with average shipping times increasing by 40% since Brexit. This has forced businesses to either stockpile goods tying up capital or find more expensive, faster transport methods. Manufacturing decline. Manufacturing output in the UK has dropped significantly. The automotive sector, in particular, has suffered a 50% decline in production compared to pre-Brexit levels. This is due to delays in importing parts and the extra costs of re-exporting finished vehicles to the EU. The rules of origin challenge. Companies exporting goods to the EU must now prove their products meet rules of origin requirements to qualify for tariff-free trade. This has been especially problematic for sectors reliant on international supply chains, such as electronics and chemicals, leading some firms to relocate production to the EU altogether. 3. The migrant worker crisis. One of the most immediate impacts of Brexit has been on the UK's labour market, with far-reaching consequences for industries reliant on migrant labour. Decline in EU workers. Before Brexit, EU citizens made up a significant proportion of the UK's workforce, particularly in agriculture, hospitality, healthcare, and logistics. Since Brexit, the introduction of stricter immigration policies and the end of free movement have led to a sharp decline in EU migrant workers. By 2023, the number of EU nationals working in the UK had dropped by 40% compared to 2019. Impact on key sectors. Agriculture. British farms reported a shortfall of 70,000 seasonal workers in 2023, leading to crops being left to rot and costing the sector over £60 million. Hospitality. The hospitality industry, which relies heavily on EU workers, saw over 20% of businesses reduce their operating hours or shut down due to staff shortages. Healthcare. The NHS is grappling with severe staff shortages, as thousands of EU doctors and nurses have left the UK since 2020. Influx of non-EU migrants. While EU migration has declined, there has been a sharp rise in non-EU migration. In 2023, the UK issued over 600,000 work visas to migrants from countries like India, Nigeria, and the Philippines. While this has helped fill some gaps, it has also created challenges. Training and integration costs. Employers have reported higher costs in training non-EU workers who are unfamiliar with UK standards and regulations. Sectoral mismatch. Many non-EU workers are filling roles in tech and healthcare, but industries like agriculture and hospitality which previously relied on EU workers, remain understaffed. Public perception and social strain. The rise in non-EU migration has sparked debates about whether Brexit truly took back control of the UK's borders. While non-EU migration brings economic benefits, critics argue that it has added pressure on housing, public services, and infrastructure, particularly in urban areas. 4. Financial services under pressure. The financial services sector, a cornerstone of the UK economy, has not been immune to Brexit's effects. Loss of passporting rights. UK-based financial firms can no longer passport their services across the EU. This has forced over 7,000 jobs to relocate to EU cities like Paris, Frankfurt, and Amsterdam, and cost the sector over £1 trillion in assets as banks move operations overseas. Decline in euro-denominated trading. In 2023, Amsterdam overtook London as the largest hub for euro-denominated equity trading, a title London held for decades. Regulatory divergence risks. As the UK diverges from EU financial regulations, firms face growing uncertainty over compliance, leading some to consider relocating permanently. 5. EU businesses feeling the pinch. While much of the focus has been on the UK, EU businesses have also faced challenges, supply chain adjustments. EU companies that relied on UK imports such as German car makers sourcing parts have had to find alternative suppliers or pay higher tariffs. This has led to a 2% increase in production costs across EU manufacturing sectors, according to a 2023 European Commission report. Reduced access to the UK market. EU exporters, particularly in industries like food and drink, have faced declining sales in the UK due to tariffs and increased competition from non-EU countries. For instance, sales of French wine to the UK dropped by 20% in 2023, as British retailers opted for alternatives from Australia and South America. 6. The consumer impact. Brexit has also hit the pockets of consumers in the UK and the EU. Rising prices in the UK. British households are now paying 10 to 15% more for goods imported from the EU due to tariffs and supply chain inefficiencies. Inflation, partly driven by Brexit, remains stubbornly high, impacting consumer spending. Reduced variety. Retailers have scaled back product offerings due to higher import costs, leaving British consumers with fewer choices. 5 years since Brexit became a reality, its impact on businesses, workers, and consumers is undeniable. While some industries are finding ways to adapt, others continue to struggle under the weight of new barriers and uncertainties. The promises of sovereignty and control have come with significant costs, and the debate over whether it was worth it is far from over. The question remains, can the UK and the EU find ways to mitigate these challenges and build a more sustainable trading relationship in the years ahead? Only time will tell.